It all began on a night that seemed quiet, almost too quiet for a world that had long lived under the shadow of distant stars. The people of Earth had always looked up into the sky with wonder, curiosity, and a sense of mystery. For centuries, they had asked the same question: are we alone out there? On this night, that question was finally answered, and the answer was not the one humanity had hoped for. The first signs came as streaks of light in the atmosphere, not like falling stars or meteors, but sharp, deliberate trails that cut across the darkness of space. Astronomers were the first to notice, their telescopes capturing the strange movements. At first, some thought it was a mistake, some sort of glitch in their instruments. But the truth became clear within hours. Massive objects were entering the solar system, moving in formations too perfect to be natural. They were ships. By the time governments and military leaders confirmed what was happening, fear had already spread across the globe. These were not peaceful explorers or distant observers. The fleet of alien warships was enormous, a terrifying display of power that blotted out the stars as it drew closer. They moved like predators circling prey, each vessel bristling with weapons that humanity could barely understand. Compared to Earth's fragile satellites and small fleets, these ships looked invincible. The aliens had not come silently. As their ships neared Earth's orbit, they broadcasted signals across every communication channel, overriding television stations, radios, and even civilian networks. Their language was strange, filled with tones and rhythms that seemed unnatural to human ears. But advanced translation software quickly decoded the meaning. Their message was simple, and it struck terror into the hearts of billions. Humanity was weak, humanity was slow, and humanity would soon fall. They laughed when they mentioned the warship orbiting near the moon, the great vessel humanity called Titan. To them, it was a joke, a slow and heavy craft that looked more like a drifting mountain than a weapon of war. They mocked its sluggish movements and declared that such a ship would never stand against their advanced fleets. They told Earth's people to surrender and avoid unnecessary suffering. To the aliens, the outcome of this invasion was already decided. But while the aliens laughed, humanity did not. Fear, yes, spread like wildfire, but so did determination. People remembered their history. They remembered how many times humanity had been underestimated, how many times stronger powers had assumed Earth would fall, only to find that humans had a way of fighting back when pushed to the edge. Still, the fear was real. Across cities, people gathered in the streets, staring up at the night sky where strange lights now glowed. Some prayed, some cried, and some prepared for the worst. Scientists rushed to analyze the alien technology, while military leaders worked around the clock to plan defenses. But deep inside, even the bravest soldiers felt the same dread. The alien fleet was too powerful, too overwhelming. The arrival of the invaders was not just a military event. It was a moment that changed how humanity saw itself. For the first time, Earth was truly united, not by politics or alliances, but by the simple fact that survival depended on it. Leaders from rival nations spoke directly to one another, setting aside conflicts that had lasted for decades. It was no longer about borders, no longer about old grudges. It was about survival of the species. The aliens, however, seemed blind to this unity. They continued to taunt and boast, believing Earth to be fractured and weak. They shared recordings of laughter, ridiculing the primitive defenses of humanity. Their scouts flew close to Earth, scanning cities and military bases, their confidence growing with every pass. In their arrogance, they saw humans as nothing more than insects, ready to be crushed beneath their boots. Yet, even as the invaders drew closer, the Titan remained silent. The massive warship floated in its orbit near the moon, its dark hull reflecting the faint light of distant stars. To the aliens, this was proof that it was powerless. To humanity, it was something else entirely, a symbol of hope, even if no one yet knew whether it could truly stand against what was coming. The people of Earth watched as the alien fleet positioned itself like a great storm on the horizon. The night skies became filled with unfamiliar constellations, ships forming lines and patterns that looked almost like a dance of death. The world held its breath, waiting for the first strike, waiting for the war that would decide the future of mankind. Children clung to their parents, asking questions no parent could answer. Soldiers checked their weapons, even though they knew their rifles would mean little against starships that could level entire cities. Politicians gave speeches filled with promises of resistance, though their voices trembled beneath the weight of uncertainty. Humanity stood at the edge of something larger than anything it had ever faced, staring into the abyss of an enemy that seemed unstoppable. And above it all, the aliens laughed. They mocked the slowness of Earth's defenses, the heaviness of the Titan, and the desperation in human eyes. They believed the war was already over before it had even begun. But what they did not understand, what they could never truly grasp, was that humanity had always been underestimated. And this time would be no different. The arrival of the invaders was not just the beginning of a war. It was the beginning of a lesson, one that the galaxy would never forget. While the alien fleet moved closer with arrogance and laughter, humanity's eyes turned toward a single warship, the Titan. It was not fast, it was not elegant, and compared to the alien vessels it looked like something built by an older, weaker race. But the people of Earth knew the truth. The Titan was humanity's last and greatest hope. The ship had been in development for years, born from fear and foresight. Long before the aliens arrived, there had been warnings. Some scientists and military leaders believed Earth was not alone in the galaxy, and they argued that one day humanity might face a threat too great for ordinary weapons. Many governments dismissed the idea, calling it paranoia, but a few voices insisted that preparations must be made. From these warnings came the secret project that built the Titan. It was unlike any other ship humans had ever created. Most warships were designed for speed, built to maneuver quickly in battles. The Titan, however, was different. It was a fortress in space, a massive giant built with thick layers of armor, shielding technology, and weapon systems that had never been tested in real combat. Engineers poured everything they had into its design, and every resource they could gather was used to build it. For some, it was seen as a gamble, a single weapon that might never be needed. But now, with the alien fleet at Earth's doorstep, it was no longer a gamble. It was the only chance humanity had left. From the alien perspective, the Titan looked ridiculous. The size made it slow, and it moved like a mountain drifting through space. They joked about how long it would take the warship to change direction, laughing that even their transport ships could outfly it. They pointed at its heavy armor as if it were proof of backward thinking. To them, speed was power, agility was strength, and a slow ship was already defeated before the battle began. But humans thought differently. They knew they could not match the alien fleets in speed or in numbers. The Titan had been designed for a different kind of fight. It did not need to chase enemies. It only needed to endure long enough to strike, and when it struck, it would hit with unimaginable force. Inside the ship, thousands of crew members worked in silence. Pilots, engineers, scientists, and soldiers. All of them had been chosen for this mission, trained for years to operate the massive warship. Many of them had left their families behind on Earth, not knowing if they would ever return. Some were young and afraid, while others were veterans who had already seen war on Earth. But all of them shared one thought. If the Titan failed, humanity would be lost. The corridors of the ship echoed with low hums of machinery. Giant reactors powered its engines and weapons, systems that could consume more energy in an hour than entire cities on Earth used in a week. The weapon bays were filled with missiles the size of buildings, energy cannons that glowed with deadly light, and railguns designed to pierce through the strongest armor known to man. Every corner of the ship felt alive, as if the Titan itself was waiting for the moment it would finally be unleashed. On Earth, people followed every update about the Titan. News broadcasts showed images of the giant ship near the moon, its silhouette shining against the stars. Some saw it as a miracle, others as a desperate hope. Parents told their children to pray for the soldiers aboard it, while scientists debated whether the ship could truly stand against the alien fleet. Even those who doubted could not help but cling to the idea that maybe, just maybe, the Titan could do what no other force on Earth could. The alien mockery continued, their broadcasts filled with laughter and insults. They said the Titan was nothing more than a coffin for the humans inside it. They promised to destroy it first, as a show of strength, before they turned their weapons on Earth itself. But those who built the ship knew something the aliens did not. The Titan was not built to win by speed or clever tricks. It was built to withstand punishment, to take every blow and still rise again. And when the time came, its weapons would remind the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. The commanders aboard the ship remained calm, even as the alien fleet closed in. They ignored the taunts and focused on their preparations. Every system was checked again and again. Weapons were primed, shields were tested, and the crew rehearsed their roles until every movement was second nature. They knew fear was natural, but they also knew discipline was stronger. The fate of Earth was in their hands, and there was no room for mistakes. The Titan's captain, a man who had spent his life preparing for battles that never came, walked the bridge with steady steps. He listened to his crew, gave quiet orders, and kept his voice firm and calm. Some whispered that he never showed fear, that he believed completely in the ship and the people who manned it. Whether or not it was true, his presence gave the crew strength. They needed to believe in him just as they needed to believe in the ship. As the alien fleet drew nearer, the silence aboard the Titan grew heavier. Every person aboard understood what was about to happen. They were the first and last shield standing between Earth and destruction. If they failed, billions would die. But if they succeeded, if they could hold long enough to strike back, then humanity would prove itself worthy of survival. The world waited, the crew waited, and the Titan drifted silently in its orbit. To the aliens, it was a helpless beast waiting to be slaughtered. To humanity, it was the last hope, the one chance to show that even in the face of impossible odds, humans would fight. And though the aliens laughed, there was one truth they had not yet learned. Slow does not mean weak. Heavy does not mean helpless. Sometimes, the strongest power is the one that waits patiently until the perfect moment arrives. The alien fleet had surrounded Earth's orbit like a cage of fire. Their ships glowed with strange lights, their weapons pulsing with energy that made human technology look like toys. Across open communication channels, they began their favorite game, mockery. At first, their voices were sharp and alien, filled with strange tones that made many humans shiver. But their translators made sure every word was understood. They wanted humanity to hear them, to feel their scorn. "Is this all you have?" they asked, their voices dripping with laughter. "A single heavy warship that drifts slower than our freighters? Do you really believe such a beast will save you?" Their laughter filled every frequency. People on Earth heard it through hacked broadcasts. Soldiers aboard the Titan heard it echo through their radios. Even children at home, hiding in their living rooms, could hear the cruel voices of the invaders as they mocked humanity's pride. The aliens wanted the world to feel small, powerless, and humiliated. They pointed their scanners at the Titan and ridiculed every detail. They joked about how its engines strained to move the massive frame. They called it a floating tomb, suggesting that the humans inside were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Some even pretended to cry fake tears, saying, "Oh, how sad for the humans. They built one ship, and it is already a failure." Their cruelty was sharp, meant to break human spirits before the first shot was ever fired. But humanity had been mocked before. On Earth's history pages, stories of survival and defiance were written in blood and sweat. Great empires had laughed at small nations, thinking them weak. Armies had mocked underdogs, only to fall when those same underdogs refused to surrender. Humanity remembered. And now, though the sting of alien laughter cut deep, something stronger began to burn inside the people of Earth. Still, the mockery was hard to endure. The crew of the Titan listened in silence as the aliens laughed at their ship. Young officers clenched their fists, wanting to shout back, but their commanders ordered them to stay quiet. "Let them talk," the captain said calmly. "Every word they waste in laughter is another second we gain." His voice was steady, but even he could feel the anger in the room. On Earth, citizens reacted in many ways. Some were terrified, covering their ears, wishing the voices would stop. Others grew angry, shouting at the sky, as if the aliens could hear them. Across different countries, people began to unite in their emotions. Strangers who had once disagreed about everything now shared the same burning feeling. They hated the laughter of the invaders. The more the aliens mocked, the more humanity wanted to prove them wrong. The aliens, of course, did not see this. Their arrogance blinded them. They thought fear would spread like fire, breaking humans into panic. They believed their taunts would make Earth surrender without a fight. They underestimated the stubbornness of the human spirit. To them, humanity was a small race, too young and too weak to stand against the stars. To humans, however, mockery was nothing new, and it had never stopped them before. Aboard the alien flagship, commanders shared jokes with one another. They broadcast recordings of their laughter again and again. "Look at it," one sneered. "It moves like a dying beast." Another added, "We should keep it as a museum piece, to remind the galaxy of human foolishness." They did not know their voices carried across the systems, reaching every human ear. They thought they were sowing despair, but they were planting anger instead. The Titan remained still. Its weapons were silent, its engines barely burning, giving the impression of helplessness. The aliens laughed louder, calling it a sleeping rock and asking, "When will your mountain move, little humans?" What they did not know was that the silence was part of the plan. Every second the ship stayed quiet, every insult it endured, brought the enemy closer to the trap. Inside the warship, the crew worked with iron discipline. No one laughed, no one responded. They checked their systems, rechecked their weapons, and waited for the captain's command. Their silence was not weakness, it was patience. They were like hunters in the dark, letting the prey come close, letting arrogance blind it before the strike. But to the outside world, it looked as if they were frozen in fear. On Earth, the broadcasts grew worse. The aliens showed images of their fleets circling the planet, promising to reduce cities to dust. They displayed their weapons, each glowing with energy, and compared them to the slow cannons of the Titan. Their laughter echoed like thunder, meant to crush hope. But as days passed, something unexpected began to happen. The mockery no longer sounded like power. To many humans, it sounded like desperation. Why would the invaders waste so much time mocking a ship they thought was weak? Why did they keep pointing at it, repeating the same insults unless deep inside, they felt uneasy about it? That thought became a whisper, and whispers spread quickly. Perhaps the aliens feared the Titan more than they admitted. Perhaps their laughter was not pure confidence, but a shield to hide nervousness. And once that idea took root, hope began to grow again. Children who had once cried at the alien voices now looked at the sky with defiance. Soldiers felt their hearts steady, telling themselves, if they laugh so much, maybe they are afraid. Even ordinary citizens began to talk back to the broadcasts, not with fear, but with courage. "Keep laughing," they muttered. "You'll see soon enough." And aboard the Titan, the captain sat quietly in his chair, his eyes fixed on the enemy formations outside. His crew waited for his word, the tension pressing on every heart. The laughter of the aliens echoed in the background, but no one paid it attention anymore. They all knew the truth. The laughter would end the moment the first shot was fired. The aliens believed the humans were broken. They thought mockery had already won the war. But what they did not understand was that words are powerless against a spirit that refuses to break. Humanity listened, endured, and grew stronger. The time of silence was almost over, and soon the alien laughter filled the airwaves. But Earth's commanders said nothing. They did not answer the insults, they did not argue, and they did not explain. To outsiders, it looked like weakness, as if humanity had nothing to say in return. But silence can be more powerful than words, and the silence of Earth's command was heavy, deliberate, and filled with meaning. Across the alien fleet, commanders watched the stillness of the Titan with amusement. They called it cowardice. They said the humans were too afraid to even defend themselves. "See how quiet they are?" one alien mocked, broadcasting his words across every channel. "They cannot even speak. Their silence is proof of their fear." The laughter returned, sharp and cruel, but the human commanders remained steady. They knew that if they shouted back, if they let emotions control their actions, they would already be losing. On Earth, the silence confused many people. Civilians gathered around radios and screens, waiting for their leaders to reply. They expected bold speeches, declarations of resistance, or at least some words of defiance. Instead, nothing came. The alien voices rang out again and again, but Earth's leaders offered no response. Some people grew afraid, whispering that maybe humanity was giving up. Others, however, began to notice something different. Silence was not surrender. Silence was patience. In war, sometimes the strongest weapon is waiting for the right moment. The commanders of Earth understood this well. They knew the Titan could not waste its energy firing blindly into the darkness. They knew the alien fleet wanted them to panic, to reveal their hand too early. So they waited, keeping their ships steady and their voices calm, letting the enemy draw closer and closer. The silence was not fear. It was strategy. Inside the war rooms on Earth, generals and scientists studied every movement of the alien fleet. They tracked the formations, the speed of their ships, and the rhythm of their maneuvers. Each alien broadcast was ignored, each insult treated as background noise. They were not concerned with laughter, they were concerned with numbers, with distance, with timing. The survival of humanity depended on choosing the perfect moment, and until then, silence was their shield. On the Titan, the silence was even heavier. The crew worked in quiet focus, their eyes fixed on their tasks. Every officer knew the importance of discipline. If one person cracked, if one person answered the aliens in anger, the entire illusion would break. The captain's voice was calm whenever he spoke, never rising in anger, never wavering in fear. "Let them mock," he told his crew. "The more they mock, the closer they come." His words reminded them that silence was not weakness. It was bait that the aliens would learn what it meant to laugh too soon. The aliens, however, could not see the truth. They grew more arrogant with every passing hour. "Humans are broken," they said to one another. "They do not fight, they do not answer. They will fall like all the others before them." Their commanders recorded messages of victory before the battle even began. They sent these recordings back to their homeworlds, eager to show their people how easily Earth had been defeated. Their arrogance blinded them, and Earth's silence fed that blindness. Meanwhile, on the ground, ordinary humans began to notice the change. At first, they had been nervous, wondering why their leaders said nothing. But as the hours turned into days, a new feeling began to spread. The more the aliens laughed, the more humanity realized something. Their leaders were not ignoring them out of fear. They were waiting, and if they were waiting, it meant they had a plan. Hope returned quietly, like a flame rekindled in the dark. Children asked their parents why the aliens were always talking but humans were not. Parents answered with calm voices, "Because we are listening. Because we are waiting." These words spread, repeated again and again, until they became something stronger than any broadcast. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was simply silent because silence had meaning. Inside the alien fleet, some younger officers began to question their own commanders. Why had the humans not surrendered yet? Why did their warship not retreat? Why did it sit so calmly, as if it had nothing to fear? Their commanders dismissed these doubts, saying, "It is nothing but a stone. Stones do not move." They laughed again, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Even among the invaders, silence was starting to feel strange. The crew of the Titan could feel the tension growing. They knew the aliens were circling closer, coming into the range of their weapons. They also knew that the moment of silence would end soon. Some felt their hands shaking as they worked at their stations, but they pressed on, steadying themselves with the thought that their silence had already weakened the enemy's mind. Every laugh, every insult, every arrogant word was a rope that the aliens were tying around their own necks. The captain stood at the bridge, his gaze locked on the stars where the enemy ships glowed. He did not smile, he did not frown. His face was calm, his eyes focused. "Patience," he whispered, though his voice carried across the room. "Wait, let them come closer." His words were like steel, keeping the crew steady as they endured the weight of silence. The alien broadcasts reached Earth again, filled with new taunts. "Your silence proves our victory," they said. "We will crush your mountain of metal, and your people will bow." But this time, many humans no longer trembled at the words. They looked at one another and said, "Let them laugh. They do not know what is coming." The silence of Earth's command had transformed from fear into confidence. Humanity's patience was beginning to feel like power. And so the game continued. The aliens mocked, the humans remained silent. The enemy drew closer, believing the humans weak, never realizing that silence was the greatest trap of all. The moment was coming when words would no longer matter, when laughter would be swallowed by fire. The silence of Earth's command was not empty. It was filled with strength, filled with calculation, filled with the promise of a strike so devastating that the galaxy would never forget it. The aliens thought silence meant surrender. They were wrong. Silence was the sound before the storm. The alien laughter still echoed across the airwaves when the silence finally broke. For days, the Titan had been still, silent, and patient. The aliens had mistaken that silence for weakness, but now the moment had come. The great warship stirred, its engines burning brighter, its massive frame turning slowly but with purpose. For the first time since the invaders arrived, the humans moved. On the bridge of the Titan, the captain gave the order with a calm voice. "Prepare to fire." No shouting, no speeches, just steady words that carried the weight of history. The crew sprang into action, their training taking over. Fingers flew across control panels, voices called out confirmations, and the hum of the ship's reactors grew into a roar. Deep inside the warship, weapons that had been hidden beneath armored plates began to awaken. The aliens noticed the change, but they laughed again. "Look," one of their commanders sneered. "The mountain moves." Finally, the humans have decided to die fighting. They did not understand what was coming. To them, the Titan was still just a slow beast, too heavy to be dangerous. They thought they had all the time in the world to strike first. But the first strike did not come from the aliens. It came from the humans. Without warning, the Titan unleashed its power. The silence of waiting turned into thunder. From its sides, massive railguns fired projectiles at speeds so great that even alien shields struggled to react. Energy cannons lit the darkness of space with blinding light. Missiles streaked forward like burning comets, each carrying warheads designed to pierce the strongest armor known to man. The first wave hit the alien fleet with terrifying precision. Ships that had once gleamed with confidence were torn apart in seconds. One exploded in a burst of fire, scattering debris like falling stars. Another was split in half by a railgun round that cut through it as if it were paper. The laughter stopped instantly. The aliens, who had mocked for so long, now screamed in shock. On Earth, people watching through military feeds gasped. They saw alien ships burning in the sky above the planet, their mighty fleet suddenly vulnerable. Cheers erupted across cities, towns, and villages. For the first time, humanity had struck back, and the strike was devastating. Aboard the Titan, the crew did not cheer. They stayed focused, firing again and again, each strike timed with ruthless accuracy. The captain's voice was steady. "Target the command ships. Cut off their orders. Make them panic." His words were followed with action as another alien flagship was struck, its hull shattering under the force of human weapons. The aliens scrambled to respond. Their ships darted and weaved, trying to escape the storm of fire. They launched their own weapons, beams of energy and swarms of plasma bolts. But the Titan's shields and armor held strong. Where lighter human ships might have been destroyed, the great warship endured. It did not chase the enemy. It did not need to. The Titan was a fortress, and its guns reached farther than the aliens had expected. One alien commander shouted in disbelief, "How? How can their weapons hit us from this range?" Another cried out, "Their ship is too slow. It should not matter. Why can't we break it?" Their arrogance had blinded them, and now they paid the price. The second wave of human fire tore through their formations. Alien vessels that had once moved with flawless precision now broke apart in chaos. Some collided as they tried to flee. Others exploded when their shields failed under the relentless barrage. The invaders had come expecting an easy victory, but instead, they found themselves trapped in the jaws of a predator they had mocked. On the ground, humanity's fear turned into hope. Families who had once cried now held each other with pride. Soldiers on Earth raised their fists to the sky, shouting in triumph. Around the world, radios buzzed with one message. Humanity was fighting back. The invincible alien fleet was no longer invincible. Still, the battle was not over. The aliens regrouped, rallying their forces to strike back. Dozens of ships opened fire on the Titan, unleashing torrents of energy. Explosions rippled across its armor, shaking the massive vessel. Inside, alarms rang out and walls trembled, but the crew did not break. Engineers worked furiously to stabilize damaged systems. Fire suppression teams raced through the corridors. And through it all, the captain's voice remained steady. Hold the line. Keep firing. The Titan answered the enemy's fury with its own. Another railgun round pierced through 3 alien ships in a single shot. A cluster of missiles found their mark, turning a squadron into burning wreckage. Energy beams carved through the darkness, striking with the force of lightning. Each time the aliens thought they had regained control, another wave of destruction fell upon them. For the first time, the galaxy's conquerors knew fear. They had laughed at the humans, mocked their ship, and treated them as insects. Now they realized the truth. The humans were dangerous. The slow warship was not a weakness, but a weapon of terrifying strength. Its armor let it survive where others would fall, and its guns turned patience into power. The Titan did not need to be fast. It only needed to strike once, and the strike was enough to shatter their pride. The first strike was more than a military attack. It was a message. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would not break. The invaders had underestimated Earth, and now the price of their arrogance was written in the wreckage of their ships drifting through the void. The battle was far from finished, but in that moment, humanity had already won something greater than a fight. They had won respect. They had proven that they were not helpless prey. And as the Titan fired again, sending another alien warship into flames, the entire galaxy began to understand. The humans had teeth. The first strike had shattered the illusion of alien invincibility. Moments ago, their voices were filled with laughter and arrogance. Now the channels crackled with shouts, alarms, and panic. The aliens who had once mocked humanity were no longer calm. Their ships burned in orbit, their formations broke apart, and the battlefield that had seemed so one-sided was suddenly tilted against them. On the alien flagship, commanders shouted orders in confusion. "Regroup! Regroup!" one screamed, but his voice was drowned out by the noise of explosions. Their fleets, designed to overwhelm enemies with speed and numbers, were suddenly vulnerable. The Titan did not chase them, but its weapons reached farther and hit harder than they had ever expected. No matter how fast they moved, they could not escape the rain of fire. Ships darted left and right, trying to find safe ground, but the humans had studied them well. Each movement was anticipated. Each attempt to dodge was countered with devastating precision. Railgun rounds sliced through ships like knives through paper. Missiles locked onto fleeing vessels, following them until they exploded in fire. Energy beams struck with the brightness of lightning, cutting apart ships that thought themselves untouchable. The aliens could not understand how this was happening. "They are too primitive," one officer cried out. "Their ship is too slow. This is impossible." But impossibility did not stop the Titan. Its cannons fired again and again, each blast shaking the void, each strike turning another arrogant predator into wreckage drifting in silence. Fear spread like wildfire among the alien ranks. Ships that had once flown in perfect formation now scattered. Some tried to retreat, hoping to regroup at a distance. Others rushed forward, desperate to overwhelm the Titan at close range. But neither choice brought victory. The retreating ships were hunted down by precise long-range fire. The ones who charged forward smashed against the warship's thick armor and unbreakable defenses, destroyed before they could land a killing blow. Inside the alien fleet, the chatter of their commanders grew frantic. There was no laughter anymore. Their voices were sharp with fear, filled with disbelief. "We cannot let them hold the line. Destroy it. Destroy that ship." But their weapons, no matter how many they fired, could not break through the Titan's defenses. Energy blasts flared against its shields, shaking the vessel, but the ship held steady like a wall of iron. The crew of the Titan felt the ship rumble with each impact, but they did not falter. Engineers raced through corridors to repair damaged systems. Technicians worked with sweaty hands to keep weapons online. Gunners stayed locked on their targets, firing with precision. They could hear the panic in the enemy's voices, and it fueled their determination. For every insult, for every laugh, humanity now answered with fire. On Earth, the people watching could hardly believe what they were seeing. The alien fleet that had terrified them days ago was breaking apart in real time. Broadcasts showed enemy ships exploding one after another, their flaming wreckage painting the skies. Families that had once cried now cheered. Soldiers on the ground saluted the sky, their pride swelling with each alien defeat. Across the planet, humanity's fear was transforming into courage. The sight of their enemy panicking gave them hope that survival was not only possible, it was within reach. Meanwhile, on the alien side, doubt spread even faster than fear. Some officers began to question their leaders. Why can't we break them? Why does the human ship not fall? Others whispered that maybe the humans were not as weak as they had believed. The more the Titan endured, the more their confidence crumbled. Their commanders tried to rally them, shouting orders, but even their voices cracked with desperation. The once proud invaders now looked clumsy. Ships collided as they scrambled to move out of the Titan's line of fire. Squadrons that had trained for years to fly as one broke apart into chaos. Their arrogance had never prepared them for this moment, for the possibility that humans could fight back, and fight back with such devastating strength. And then came the moment that changed everything. An alien flagship, one of their most powerful vessels, took a direct hit from the Titan's main cannon. The blast tore through its shields, split its hull, and turned it into a ball of fire that lit up the darkness. Every alien ship saw it. Their commanders, their soldiers, their crews, all of them witnessed the destruction of a ship they believed untouchable. The panic deepened into terror. On the Titan, the captain watched the flames spread across the battlefield. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He gave no victory speech, no triumphant cheer. He simply said, "Target the next one." His crew obeyed without hesitation, their movements quick and precise. They had no time for celebration. The battle was not over, and they knew the enemy would fight harder now, but they also knew fear was already their greatest weapon. The aliens who had mocked the humans now faced a truth they had never imagined. Their enemy was not only resisting but winning. Their speed was useless, their numbers meaningless. Against the patience and firepower of the Titan, all their advantages turned into weaknesses. They were no longer hunters. They were prey. As the battle raged on, more alien ships exploded, their wreckage drifting like broken bones across the void. Their commanders tried to retreat to pull their fleets back, but the humans would not let them go so easily. Each retreating ship was hunted down, each escape punished with fire. The panic grew into despair, and despair into chaos. The invasion that had begun with laughter was now filled with screams. The aliens, who had once believed Earth would fall in days, were now realizing the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not helpless. And the Titan, the warship they had mocked as slow and useless, was the very weapon tearing their pride to pieces. In that moment, the galaxy changed forever. For the first time, the great conquerors of the stars felt fear of a species they had underestimated. Panic among the invaders was not just a sign of defeat. It was the beginning of their downfall. Humanity had shown its strength, and the enemy would never forget it. The battlefield that had once seemed lost now burned with hope. Alien ships floated as broken wrecks, their fires lighting up the sky. The mighty invaders who had mocked humanity were scattered, their discipline gone, their voices filled with fear. The war that had begun with arrogance was turning into something no alien commander had imagined. Humanity's fight for survival was becoming humanity's victory. On the bridge of the Titan, the crew worked with steady hands. The captain gave quiet orders, his voice calm even as the ship trembled with the force of its weapons. Every member of the crew knew what was at stake. They were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for Earth, for their families, for the survival of humankind. Each pull of the trigger, each strike of a cannon, carried the weight of an entire planet's hope. The alien fleet was crumbling fast. Their attempts to regroup had failed. Their speed, once their greatest strength, now worked against them. In their rush to escape, they collided with each other. Squadrons fell apart. Leaders shouted conflicting commands, and fear spread like wildfire through their ranks. Ships that had once moved in perfect formations now darted wildly, their captains desperate to live. But no matter how fast they fled, the Titans' weapons found them. One by one, alien warships were reduced to flaming wrecks. Missiles cut across the void and tore apart cruisers. Railgun shots sliced through armor, punching holes so deep that ships broke apart within seconds. Energy beams followed retreating vessels until they exploded, their wreckage scattering like ashes. Humanity, once mocked as weak, was now dealing blow after blow with terrifying precision. On Earth, people who had waited in fear now cheered. Broadcasts showed the battle unfolding in real time, and the sight of alien ships burning filled their hearts with pride. Crowds gathered in cities, watching the skies, crying tears of relief and joy. Soldiers on the ground raised their weapons to the heavens, saluting the Titan as it struck down enemy after enemy. The spirit of humanity, once shadowed by fear, now burned brighter than ever. For the invaders, there was no such hope. Their arrogance had blinded them. They had expected an easy victory, a quick conquest of a primitive world. Instead, they found themselves humiliated, beaten back by the very species they thought beneath them. Their commanders tried to issue orders, but no one listened. Some captains abandoned the fight, fleeing into the darkness of space. Others begged for reinforcements, but none came. The truth was clear. The humans had turned the tide, and nothing could stop them now. On the alien flagship, silence spread as the Titan's weapons locked onto it. This was no ordinary ship. It was the pride of their fleet, a symbol of their power. Its commander, who once laughed at human weakness, now stood pale and speechless as alarms screamed around him. His crew shouted warnings, their hands shaking as they worked controls that no longer mattered. Then the Titan fired. The blast ripped through the flagship's shields, tearing its massive body apart. Fire erupted from its core, explosions shaking it to pieces until it was nothing but a burning shell. Across the battlefield, every alien ship saw it happen. Their greatest vessel, their strongest leader, gone in a single strike. The shock broke what little courage they had left. Panic turned into despair. Despair turned into defeat. The Titan's crew did not celebrate. There was no time for that. They pressed on, firing again and again, until the last of the alien resistance collapsed. Ships that had mocked them were reduced to floating ruins. Others turned tail and fled, their lights vanishing into the dark. Humanity had not only survived the attack, they had destroyed the fleet that once threatened to wipe them out. When the final alien ship exploded, silence fell over the battlefield. Wreckage drifted in the void, glowing faintly against the blackness of space. The humans watched from their posts, their hands trembling not from fear, but from the realization of what they had achieved. They had fought the invincible and won. They had faced those who thought themselves gods and proven them wrong. Humanity had claimed its first great victory among the stars. Back on Earth, people poured into the streets in celebration. Families embraced, strangers hugged, and soldiers wept openly. The fear that had once gripped the planet was gone, replaced by pride and unity. For the first time in history, humanity stood not as divided nations, but as one people, survivors who had beaten back the impossible. The name of the Titan spread like wildfire, whispered with reverence, remembered as the ship that saved them all. But even in victory, the captain of the Titan remained calm. As the crew cheered quietly, he stood at the center of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the stars. He knew this was not the end. The aliens who fled would return, and when they did, they would come with vengeance. Today was a triumph, yes, but it was also a warning. The galaxy now knew what humanity could do, and that truth would shake empires to their core. For the invaders, the shame was unbearable. Their leaders would demand answers. Their soldiers would remember the fear. And across their worlds, whispers would spread of the humans, the species that had destroyed their fleet with a single slow warship. Their laughter had turned to silence, their arrogance to ashes. They would never forget the day Earth fought back. For humanity, it was more than just survival. It was a beginning. They had seen their enemy's weakness. They had tasted victory. And deep within their hearts, they understood a new truth. If they could defeat these invaders, then they could stand against anyone. Humanity's place among the stars was no longer a question. It was a promise. The Titan drifted quietly among the wreckage, its weapons cooling, its crew exhausted but unbroken. The captain finally spoke, his voice steady, carrying the weight of what had just happened. "Let them run," he said softly. "They will remember us." And with that, humanity's first great victory was sealed. Not just in the fire of battle, but in the history of the stars. The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the sound of war. The wreckage of alien ships floated in space, glowing faintly against the endless darkness. Fires burned quietly, and broken pieces of metal spun slowly, reminders of the fight that had just taken place. The Titan drifted among the ruins, its engine steady, its hull scarred but unbroken. Inside, the crew sat in quiet disbelief. They had survived. They had won. Humanity had done the impossible. On Earth, the news spread faster than light. Screens everywhere showed the images of the alien fleet's destruction. Cities that had been filled with fear only hours ago now erupted with joy. People poured into the streets, waving flags, hugging strangers, crying tears of relief. For the first time in history, humanity stood united. Borders, languages, and old conflicts no longer mattered. They had all faced the same enemy, and they had all won together. In villages and towns, people gathered around radios and televisions. In war-torn places, children who had hidden in fear now laughed and clapped as their parents told them the aliens were gone. Soldiers returned to their bases, some still in disbelief that they were alive to see another day. Families reunited, holding each other tightly, as if afraid that letting go would make the nightmare return. The whole planet breathed for the first time in what felt like forever. But the leaders of Earth knew the truth. This victory was not the end. It was only the beginning. The aliens who had fled would not forget. They would regroup. They would plan. And when they came back, they would come stronger, faster, and angrier. Earth could not afford to celebrate forever. They had to prepare. Humanity had been thrown into the galaxy's attention, and now there was no turning back. In the halls of government, meetings began immediately. World leaders who once argued and distrusted each other now sat together at the same table. Their voices were serious, their faces pale but determined. They spoke not as rivals but as allies. The survival of humanity had forced them into unity. Plans were drawn to rebuild defenses, share technology, and train soldiers. The dream of a single global alliance was no longer just talk. It was now reality. The scientists who had worked in secret were now praised as heroes. Engineers and researchers who had once been ignored now stood at the center of attention. The Titan, which had been mocked even by humans for being too slow and outdated, was studied with pride. Every detail of its design was re-examined, every weapon improved, every weakness reinforced. New warships were planned, stronger and faster, using everything humanity had learned from the battle. For the crew of the Titan, life had changed forever. They were no longer just soldiers or workers, they were legends. People looked at them with awe and gratitude. Children memorized their names. Songs and stories were created about their bravery. But inside the crew's hearts, there was no room for arrogance. They had seen death too closely. They had felt fear too deeply. They knew their victory had not been easy. Many lives had been lost, and the battlefield was littered with silent graves among the stars. Among the aliens, the defeat was a wound that would not heal. Word of their loss spread across their empire like poison. The commanders who had promised an easy conquest now faced shame. Their people whispered in fear, wondering how such a weak species could have destroyed a fleet of champions. The arrogance that once filled their hearts was replaced with doubt. They began to study humanity, to watch carefully, to plan revenge. But fear lingered, and it would never truly leave them. Back on Earth, life slowly began to return to normal, but nothing was truly the same. People looked at the stars differently. Before, the night sky had been a place of wonder, a place for dreams and quiet thoughts. Now it was a place of danger, a reminder that humanity was not alone. Every twinkling light held the possibility of another enemy, another battle. Yet, at the same time, it also sparked something else: ambition. If humans could defend their home, could they not also explore? Could they not reach out and carve their place among the stars? The younger generation, who had watched the battle unfold, felt a fire within them. Children spoke of becoming pilots, engineers, and explorers. Schools began teaching not only math and science, but also the history of the battle, the importance of unity, and the need to prepare for the future. Humanity's destiny had shifted. No longer bound only to Earth, they now looked outward, knowing that their survival depended on their courage. The captain of the Titan knew this truth better than anyone. Standing on the bridge, he looked at the wreckage drifting in the void. His crew waited for his words, but he said little. His silence carried more weight than speeches. Finally, he spoke softly, almost like he was speaking to himself, but the whole crew heard. "This is only the first." The words sank deep into their hearts. They knew he was right. In the months that followed, humanity rebuilt stronger than ever. New alliances were formed, new technologies were created, and the people of Earth trained not just for defense but for expansion. The scars of the battle remained, but they became a source of strength. Every monument, every name written on walls of remembrance, reminded humans why they fought. And so, what began as a desperate struggle turned into a new beginning. Humanity had been tested and had proven itself. The laughter of the aliens had turned into silence, and the once slow warship had become the symbol of human power. The stars no longer belonged only to others. Now humanity was ready to claim them. The Titan sailed once more, not as a lone defender, but as the first of many. Behind it, shipyards worked day and night, building a new fleet. Before it, the stars stretched endlessly, filled with both danger and opportunity. Humanity's journey among the stars had begun, and nothing could stop it. The battle was over, but the story was just beginning.